Thank you, Mr. President. And let me also start by thanking Emergency Relief Chief Fletcher and Assistant Secretary General Poby for their briefings. And I think I can say that they're very strong and compelling calls for action. Mr. President, our briefers have once again painted an extremely stark picture. One of a country reeling from years of devastating conflict, of a city under siege and constant attack, of a people trapped, grappling daily with malnutrition, disease, and unrestrained violence. People in desperate need of support. One would assume, or at least hope, that such suffering would spur a flurry of collective action. Yet, the cries of the Sudanese people have been met with silence. Silence from the international community and silence from this Council. This simply cannot continue. Mr. President, I have three urgent messages. First, the appalling level of violence committed by the RSF in al-Fashir is simply staggering. As we've heard, reports of summary executions and other grave violations of international law expose a grim truth. The RSF continues to operate with total impunity, committing large-scale ethnically motivated atrocities with little to no repercussions. Yesterday's massacre in a hospital in which almost 500 patients and companions were killed is a further shocking and damning example of this violence. Denmark strongly condemns these heinous acts, and we should collectively demand justice and accountability without delay. No one is safe in al-Fashir, as Assistant Secretary Poby said, but in this conflict, as in so many others, it is the most vulnerable, especially women and children, that suffer first and most. al-Fashir's 130,000 children are trapped. For some, siege is all they have known. In October, as we heard, nearly 1 in 5 civilians killed in the city were children. Further, we see women and girls subjected to systematic gender and sexual-based violence, acts which are beyond comprehension. Just last night, at an event hosted by the Mission of Denmark to mark the 25th anniversary of Resolution 1325 on Women, Peace and Security, a woman civil society leader recounted how she was forced to flee Darfur 20 years ago during the genocide. Today, 20 years later, we hear the same stories of unimaginable pain, but we do not see the same international reaction as USG Fletcher also alluded to. We demand that the RSF and their allies guarantee safe passage for those seeking safety. We demand full respect for international law and compliance with Resolution 2736. Second, the warring parties must ensure rapid, safe, unhindered, and sustained humanitarian access for all civilians in their areas of control. This is not an option, it is an obligation. Since the war began, innocent humanitarian workers have been killed while attempting to save the lives of innocent civilians. Denmark pays tribute to these workers and to all those who continue to work under impossibly difficult conditions. We demand that all parties cease the dangerous manipulation of humanitarian aid and that they cooperate fully with the UN and its partners. In this regard, we deeply deplore that officials from WFP Sudan have been declared persona non grata and urge a reversal of that decision. We further reiterate the urgent need to retain and expand cross-border and cross-line access for humanitarian aid into Sudan. The protection of civilians and humanitarian access must never be politicized or used as a bargaining chip, nor should they hinge of achieving a political solution. Third, Mr. President, Denmark calls for an immediate and unconditional ceasefire. This is needed urgently throughout Sudan. However, we need more than a ceasefire. We need genuine efforts to end the conflict. Current mediation efforts must come together and bring the parties to the table, ultimately leading to an inclusive, civilian-led transition free from coercion of armed actors. In this regard, we underline the need to preserve Sudan's sovereignty, unity, and territorial integrity. Denmark supports efforts by the Quad, led by the United States, and as laid out in the statement of 12 September, which was reaffirmed last week. However, no mediation effort would succeed unless external interference through supply of arms and military equipment ceases immediately. We recall that all UN member states have a binding obligations to comply with this Council's arms embargo on Darfur. The full panel of experts must be appointed urgently to effectively execute its mandate. Mr. President, in closing, this conflict has devastated Sudanese society for far too long. It has destroyed too many lives and too many futures. It is a clear and blatant threat to regional stability. Around this table, it is our responsibility to address it. Denmark believes that it is long past time that this Council come together to collectively and forcefully demand an end to this war. We are pleased that just a few minutes ago, the Council was able to agree to a press statement condemning the reported atrocities and calling on all parties to allow safe and unhindered humanitarian access. But we need to go much further than that. Now is the time to work on a substantial contribution from the Council, to take concrete action to bring peace to Sudan. We stand ready to engage constructively with all Council members towards this urgent goal. I thank you.
Я благодарю представителя Дании за ее выступление. Сейчас предоставляю слово представителю Соединенного Королевства.
Thank you, President.